Welcome to OutWithDan, the podcast that spotlights and examines the voices of LGBTQ+ authors, characters, and our allies. Together, we lift our voices and we tell our stories. I'm Dan White. Join me as I chat with this week's author. Hello and welcome back to Out with Dan. Today I'm excited to talk to Rachel Moore about Safari Murder Party. Oh, I love that cover. So a friend of mine that I've been friends with nearly 40 years said to me, "Oh my God, Dan, you have to read this book. It is so wonderful and so funny." She is 100% right. So it is your first thriller. Is that right, Rachel?
That's correct.
All right. And so I just said it was funny, and now I've said it's a thriller. So it is important to talk about the fact that it's a thriller with a bunch of humor in it. So will you give the audience an overview of what Safari Murder Party is about?
Absolutely. Safari Murder Party follows a burnt out executive assistant to the CEO of a global publishing conglomerate. It's called Cartwright Media, and he is Dyer Cartwright. And she has worked for him for 3 years. She's desperate to no longer be an assistant. And in her hopes of getting it's really not a promotion, it's a lateral move to the photography department, she is desperate to go on this corporate retreat where she knows that deals are made, promotions are given. So she finagles her way onto this corporate retreat, which is held annually on her boss's private island, where there is a safari park, and it's what she thinks is going to be a nice, relaxing time. She's put all this effort into planning it, making sure it's perfect for everybody. Come to find out that her boss is eliminated from the island with the help of a few hungry lions, and suddenly everyone on the retreat is thrust into a battle royale for the inheritance of the company. So it's no longer about just getting the job she wants. Fletcher is going to have to fight to survive to escape the island.
I love that. That's a perfect setup for the delicious story that you gave us. So let's talk a little bit, because I just really want to lampoon my former career as in corporate America. So let's talk about how dangerous corporate America really is. So that is something that you touch on a lot in this with such humor. You know, I think the American dream is to forge ahead and to climb the ladder and all that stuff. That ladder is a dangerous place to be on often in real life. And I love the fact that you lambasted that in this. So Fletcher is a really hardworking individual, and everything should point to her getting a promotion or a lateral move, as you say. But it doesn't quite work out that way for her. So what do you put in Fletcher's way along the way before we get to the island?
Oh, I mean, I think Fletcher is up against her own fear of failure. That's a huge one right from the jump. She's in an unsatisfying relationship at the start of the book, and she's been complacent in it, but also complicit in the continuation of it because it's easier than striving out on her own. And maybe she doesn't end up in another relationship, and that's scary. And so I think she's really standing in her own way before she even gets to the island, where things go really, really off the rails.
I agree. You know, I do think that our own internal fears really do hinder us from moving forward in life. And I think you touched on that so eloquently in this, in the fact that, you know, it isn't always about outside forces keeping us down. Sometimes it's the internal dialogue we have with ourselves. So is that something that you had to deal with in corporate America?
I worked, honestly, never for a corporation. So
Oh,
my job as a fiction
congratulations.
writer, I write fiction, I make it up. But I have worked in several various companies in different stages of their development, right? And every company is going to give you something different. And I think that there are people who will absolutely thrive in a company where another person will just get eaten alive. And I think that's really important. But I was working a job where I was really unsatisfied. And I always joke that I developed, much like Fletcher, this sort of Pavlovian stress response to the sound of my email notification, where like my heart would just fall to the bottom of my stomach. And it came to this point where I thought my job shouldn't be killing me. And that was really the onus of this book was, well, what if it was? Like, what
You're
if it was
right.
actually killing you?
Yeah, and I love that. And I do think that that is something that hopefully we as a humanity come to deal with in our lives, that we learn that there are certain things we're capable of and certain things we're not capable of. I know that I pushed myself really, really hard in my 30s and early 40s to accomplish all I could because that brass ring was way up here and I needed to get to it. Well, I never got to it. And I often shot myself in the foot because I also have opinions and don't mind sharing those. And turns out in a lot of corporate jobs, those opinions are not looked on favorably. They're looked on as with disfavor.
Dan, you and I might be a lot alike.
Yeah, I think so, Rachel. I tell you, in reading this, I just fell in love with it. I mean, I did. And so I rarely do so many comparisons, but there's an Australian writer named Jane Harper who wrote a book called The Force of Nature. And it is a corporate getaway gone really, really wrong. Now, yours is has a lot more light-hearted humor with it. However, there's a lot of danger in your book. I don't want the audience to think that Fletcher's not in danger because Fletcher has to fight for her life. And
Yes.
she also finds some compatriots that she does not believe. At the beginning of the book is somebody she doesn't like at all, and they're almost sworn enemies, at least in Fletcher's mind. So, what about that relationship was important to you to bring out in these characters?
When I sat down to write Safari Murder Party, and I think it's important to remember that my background is writing romances. I write adventure romances for teens as well. And I knew that I wanted to incorporate some element of romance into this book. So it is this composite of all of these things that I enjoy. I mean, it's funny. I think it's funny. I'm glad you think it's funny. I tried to write a comedy and it's a thriller, it's adventurous, it's high stakes. Everybody's lives are on the line, but it's also got this really grounding romance that for me was the opportunity to explore the way that good can beat evil in even the most outrageous of circumstances. And that's why I love writing romance. I love seeing good win no matter what it's up against. And I love writing things that are just the worst thing it could be up against. And so that's the levity, I think, of the story is that there is this lightheartedness to it despite the chaos, despite the danger.
Well, and as we talked about, Fletcher is her own worst enemy in so many ways, and so Waylon is her slash enemy slash end up not being an enemy, and he tends bar. And I have actually spent my last dollar sometime on that overpriced drink that I did not need because I wanted to be impressive. I want somebody to think I'm a little better than I am. So I loved that because I really felt like I saw so much of myself in Fletcher. And I know in the acknowledgments at the end of the book, that's something you say, if you see some of Fletcher in you, that's a good thing.
Writing Fletcher was so special and important to me. And I do touch on this in my acknowledgments as well, that writing her a character dared me to also be brave. And I think that if there's one thing someone can take away from this book, it is that element of bravery. And it was really fun to write her dynamic with Waylon because he is symbolic of everything she's trying not to admit to herself. And I loved it.
Yes, yes. And I it's not giving anything away, but there's one scene where they're behind the bar and he's trying to protect her. And she looks up and she's like right at his midsection. And your description of that was so wonderful because it's just one of those things that, depending on where your eye level is, you see things from a different perspective. And it was those little touches of humanity, and this is what happens in real life that were so fun to read.
Thank you. Thank you. I had so much fun writing it, and I'm glad it shows.
Yes, it does indeed. So tell us about some of the other characters that are in your book and how they fit into the corporate scheme?
We have a very eccentric cast of characters where I was really tasked with writing caricatures rather than full characters. I love to try to give them backstories and make them feel like real people, but at the end of the day, they're kind of part of this amorphous blob of a corporation. I think that there is something metaphorical in that aspect of losing yourself to whoever you become at the company. And so I was sort of playing this teeter-totter game of, well, I want them to be real enough, but they're also still just there to poke fun at, basically. And so we have a whole list of people. And in fact, when you pop open the book, you'll see the organizational chart at the front, which is one of my favorite touches. And I mean, we really run the gamut from we've got, senior vice presidents and we've got interns who are Nepo babies. Like we really run the full spectrum of the kind of employee you might run into at a corporation.
Yeah, and it is one of those things that I really felt like I knew these characters because I have worked with these characters before. It is not only is it Fletcher's self-doubts, but there are people who see that in someone else. It's like the shark smelling blood in the water. When somebody is slightly down, there's always someone in a corporate environment who's going to try to put their foot on their neck, keep them down, because what is it, dog eat dog world? That is the way corporate life is. Some people don't play fairly. And it is obvious that not all of Fletcher's coworkers play fairly.
Absolutely. And I think that we really see the deterioration of some of their characters. The person you thought you could trust suddenly turns around and is holding a machete. I mean, you never know, like, who's going to turn their back on you. And that's something that Fletcher finds herself up against as well.
Well, and I also think that, in real life, I have always hated it when I hear a CEO say, well, we're a big one happy family. No, you're not. You're a collection of employees. That's all you are. You're not one big happy family. That's a control tactic. And that's something that Dyer uses against them as well. We're one big happy family. We're moving together. But that is not true in real life. I mean, in real life, the person at the top is typically always at the top. And everybody else is the bird on the branches below getting caught.
There's a image that I loved writing, and it's early in the book, but Dyer has this poached ivory cane that has been whittled into what is effectively a food chain. And I think that is so obviously, like, it felt a little on the nose as I was writing it, but I had so much fun that I just couldn't stop myself. And I loved getting to pull that out and really highlight the fact that, yes, this is a company retreat, but it's also going to be up against, the natural progression of the ecosystem and who's going to come out on top.
Well, and of course, I thought that was something you did so brilliantly as well, as you gave us a little bit of environmentalism in this, PETA, sustainability as far as humans versus animals go. And of course, how we as humans often use animals to further ourselves. You have those eccentric people who collect these exotic tigers or bears or whatever from around the world to make themselves feel better. And that's certainly what a dryer is in this world. And I think that, when you see that person in real life, you have to realize exactly who they are. If someone shows you their face, believe them because they've shown it to you. Don't try to make an excuse for them. They are exactly what you think they are.
Absolutely.
Well, again, the book is called Safari Murder Party. It is by Rachel Moore. It is so delicious, so highly recommended. I hope you the very best of success with it.
Thank you so much, Dan. It was so fun to chat with you.
Thank you for joining me for this week's episode of Out with Dan. You can find more information about this podcast and its host at OutWithDan.com, on Twitter at OutWithDan, and on Instagram and Facebook at GoOutWithDan.
This podcast is hosted by Authors on the Air Global Radio Network, and the theme music is provided by bensound.com. Join us again soon for the next episode of Out with Dan.